place. We are only 37 miles wide and 48 miles long, but we are on the front lines of this global struggle against climate change, a struggle in which Senator Whitehouse is a global leader. And people ask me, why do you, Seth, as state treasurer, spend so much time and energy thinking about climate change? Shouldn't the state treasurer be, off doing math or counting money? Or nobody really knows what the treasurer does. Like, shouldn't you be focused on other things? And what I say to them is, I would not be doing my job if I wasn't thinking about climate. Because think about it. Climate change, in addition to being a moral and existential and environmental threat to our world, climate change is also expensive, all right? When you have extreme weather events occurring more and more frequently, and you have infrastructure to repair, and you have cleanup, and you have people who need to be supported, it's expensive. Here in Rhode Island, just in the last couple months, when we had the storms in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, Rhode Island Air National Guardsmen and women were flying supply aircraft down to support the relief efforts. Really good, important, heroic work being done by Rhode Islanders, but it's not cheap, right? That's a lot of jet fuel, all right? And it's not just macro costs. Rhode Islanders are already feeling the effects of climate change in their wallets too, okay? When you have more extreme weather conditions, you feel that in your property insurance. You feel that in your utility bills, all right? There are costs that are already being passed on to Rhode Islanders and to Americans all across the country that are directly attributable to climate change. This is an expensive problem, and even if you didn't care about anything else, which you should, there is a real financial reason that we need to be concerned about this. President Trump was right when he said that the storm in Puerto Rico is expensive. He was wrong to assign blames to the Puerto Ricans. The blame should have been assigned to climate change. But he was right that it's expensive. So this is something that all of us should be thinking about. That's why when I took office, one of the first things that I started working on with a number of partners in this room, including the senator, was setting up some new green infrastructure programs at the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, one of which we call the Efficient Buildings Fund, where we have invested millions of dollars in energy retrofits of public buildings all over Rhode Island. We've retrofitted fire stations here in Providence. We've put solar panels on the wastewater treatment site in Newport. We've done windmills in West Warwick. We've done streetlights in Pawtucket. All told, the first round of Efficient Buildings Fund activity provided about $17 million in low-cost financing to our cities and towns. It's saving those cities and towns $20 million net on their energy costs. And oh, by the way, we put 250 tradesmen and women to work in the process. That was just the first round. There's another round that's going to go out in the next month or so. We set up a commercial PACE program that is helping businesses across Rhode Island lower their cost of energy and become more resilient and energy efficient. And I was really excited when a couple months ago, by executive order, Governor Raimondo appointed the state's first chief resiliency officer at the Infrastructure Bank to help better prepare Rhode Island for the impacts of climate change. This is really good, tangible stuff that is going to help Rhode Islanders, but also provide an example to the rest of the nation. And I'll end on something that Sheldon mentioned. The most important part of my job is being a responsible fiduciary of the state's finances. And included within that is management of the state's retirement system. This is the primary source of retirement security for 60,000 Rhode Islanders, first responders, teachers, nurses, social workers. 60,000, all Rhode Islanders deserve to have a secure retirement, especially those who spend their lives serving the community. And I would not be a responsible investor, I would not be a responsible steward of the retirement funds for those 60,000 Rhode Islanders if I wasn't thinking about climate change. Because think about this. Somewhere in Rhode Island this morning, there is a first-year, 23-year-old teacher teaching a lesson, and that first-year teacher, retirement may be the last thing on his or her, actually I'm a former teacher, I can tell you that for that first-year teacher, retirement is the last thing on his or her mind on a Friday morning. But that teacher is still going to be in the pension system 80 years from now. And as investors in the pension fund, we have to have a long-term horizon. We have to be thinking about what's the state of the economy going to be, what are the markets going to look like, not just today or next week or next year, but on that 80-year horizon, because I owe just as much of a duty to that 23-year-old teacher as I do to the 93-year-old retiree. And in that context, we have to be thinking about the long game. That is why we have been joining with other investors from around the country and around the world to push the companies that we invest in to behave more responsibly and sustainably. I was proud that Rhode Island voted in favor of that Exxon proposal. We also have filed or co-filed proposals at a number of energy companies, Devon, Chevron, Exxon, Occidental, trying to drive those companies to be transparent and come clean about their efforts to fund climate denial. Because that is a losing proposition for us as a retirement system. If some of these companies are spending our money to fund climate denial and to lobby against the efforts of Sheldon and others to put the brakes on climate change nationally and globally, it may help those companies financially a little bit in the short term, but it is going to hurt the performance of our portfolio over the long term because we know that climate change is expensive and it has a dampening effect on economic growth. So we're doing these things in part because we know it's the right thing to do, but also because we know it is the right thing for that 23-year-old teacher so that he or she can know that that pension is going to be there 80 years from now or 70 years from now. So we need to be thinking about the long term. We need to be thinking about how do we integrate sustainability into the work that we do as investors. And that's the next step for us. You know, when I took office, became active in shareholder engagement around climate change. For the first time, Rhode Island hadn't been active in these efforts before. And we've had some good successes. We've been a part of some good efforts. We're going to continue to do that, engaging with these companies, introducing shareholder proposals, doing what we can to get them to behave more responsibly. But our new project, and a very challenging project that we're embarking on, is integrating climate risk into our investment process and how we decide where to invest and who to invest with. That is a very complicated and very intense process, but we're doing it because we know it's the right thing to do for those 60,000 Rhode Islanders who we serve. And I'll end on this note. You know, in the absence of real leadership from the White House, from our executive branch at the federal level on climate, it is incumbent on investors like us who care about the long term to stand up and be active and engage with companies and get them to behave better. And you are starting to see that. You know, Senator Whitehouse mentioned a few large institutional investors that voted in favor of that Exxon proposal. That's a good thing. I've been talking a lot with my counterparts in other states, in New York and California and Massachusetts. You know, we have an $8 billion pension fund in Rhode Island. Massachusetts, they have a $60 billion fund. CalPERS and CalSTRS combined are almost $500 billion. You start to get all of these groups together, pretty soon you're talking real money, right? And these companies are going to have to take notice. So I'm going to continue these efforts, and I want to thank everybody here for showing up and for being a part of these solutions. I do feel very fortunate to be from Rhode Island, in part because we have great leaders at the federal level, like Sheldon Whitehouse, but also because we have great leaders in government and nonprofit and advocacy and the business community here in Rhode Island who understand the importance of this work and who understand that Rhode Island has a real opportunity to lead by example. So, best wishes today. Enjoy the rest of the program. I hope it's productive. I hope that we learn from each other and that we come away with some good, actionable next steps. And I will end where I began and say, Sheldon, happy birthday, and thank you for bringing us all together again. Thank you.